Top executives at the BBC are resigning after facing criticism for allegedly editing a speech of Donald Trump.
The apologising is for the way the team edited President Trump's speech to his supporters on January the 6th.
Director General Tim Davie and new CEO Deborah Turness both announced their resignations last night. Britain's public broadcaster allegedly edited a speech Trump made on January 6th of 2021 before protesters stormed the Capitol in Washington. Critics say the way the speech was edited was misleading and cut out a section where Trump said he wanted supporters to demonstrate peacefully.
The BBC has been institutionally biased for decades. I well remember the Wilson report 2 decades ago, saying the BBC were not covering areas like Europe and immigration with any sense of impartiality. And you could, add on to that net zero, climate change, all their interpretation of the horrors that have happened in Gaza. And now, of course, the United States president. If I was the president of the United States of America, if I was the person making sure that the United Kingdom had security guarantees that meant that it could be defended, whereas on its own it would be helpless, and I'd been stitched up on the eve of a national election. I mean, people talk about election interference. What the BBC did was election interference.
So much for some of them.
We do take it really seriously. I mean, there are real issues here. They're over a 3-year period. And just let me say, the BBC in those 3 years has produced hundreds and hundreds of hours of outstanding journalism on television, on audio, on online. We have, and we do a great job there, but inevitably we make mistakes.
I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me. But I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider.
Do you think the journalists
our journalists aren't corrupt? Our journalists are hard-working people who strive for impartiality, and I will stand by their journalism.
Is there institutional bias?
One take on the current controversy is to say, well, look, this is a very straightforward case of a right-wing figures on the board sort of defenestrating the leadership of the BBC. And I don't think that's completely untrue, but I think it's also the case that the people in the management side of the dispute, if you like, haven't really been able to set out any clear vision for what the BBC is, what it should do. There's lots of sort of nice words and statements about, the BBC being trusted and so on, but there hasn't really been any public discussion around the BBC prior to this moment about how the BBC should interact with and respond to its audience.
I spoke to the president on Friday.
There's no doubt there are vociferous campaigns against the BBC, either for ideological reasons or commercial reasons. And the BBC has lots of enemies out there. Now, that happens. I mean, the BBC has to live with that. What it then has to do, of course, is be as good as it possibly can be. And that means not making what appear to be dodgy edits in documentaries about Donald Trump. And it has to live up to the very highest standards. And if it lives up to the highest standards, it gives itself a degree of armour plating against those campaigns. But the fact those campaigns exist and polarisation is there in British society does make the BBC's job more difficult.